Africa. We bring the African perspective to the world, all from Southern Africa, but as we say, plenty perspectives on the myriad stories that we cover. So do stay with us as we bring you the very latest developments on a number of top stories. And this is one of those that has been watched not only in South Africa, but I think across the continent, as it's something that affects several countries on the continent as well. South Africa's International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola saying Pretoria is aware of 2 South Africans who were recruited and killed while serving in the Russian army in occupied Ukraine. Lamola says some of the South Africans, apart from the 17 already identified, remain in occupied Ukraine. Russia is continuing its invasion of the neighbouring country. Lamola was speaking in Kwazulu Natal after visiting the families of some of the South Africans who have returned from Russia. For more on this, we on the line to Spokesperson of the South African Department of International Relations, Chrispin Phiri. A very good evening to you, Chrispin. Thank you so much for speaking to us. What are the conditions of those that have returned so far? Have you been, given information about their state of mind, their health, and the experiences that they had there?
Thank you very much for having me on Channel Africa, Tshepisa, and good evening to our listeners. Indeed, the individuals who found themselves in Russia under what we believe are very suspicious circumstances have been returned. 17 of them were in Russia on the front lines in the war against Ukraine, fighting for Russia. And as you may know, there is an active investigation underway trying to establish how they ended up there and how were they recruited to form part of this. This is because in terms of South African law, the Foreign Military Assistance Act, aiding and abetting a foreign military is deemed to be illegal, prohibited outright. So some of these individuals, unfortunately, in the process of this conflict were injured. So there are 2 who still remain in Russia under the healthcare of the Russian government. And we hope that they'll be able to recover soon and be repatriated back home. The other individuals have returned. Some of them returned a couple of days ago via OR Tambo. And the last batch returned, I think it was yesterday, via King Shaka International Airport. That was 11. So 11 returned via King Shaka and 4 returned via OR Tambo. And of course, upon returning, one of the very important things was that they be engaged by law enforcement agencies to also establish how they got there, and also to be assessed by the relevant state departments, such as social development, to understand, just actually say what their state of mind is. One would anticipate that those reports, of course, will be kept somewhat confidential, but also would still be processed by the relevant departments. So as we speak now, I will not be privy to detail much around what the assessment entails, but I can assure you that that is something that the government has undertaken.
And as you say, Chrispin, it's important to guard their privacy just in terms of their personal health or any psychosocial, services they may require. But you did mention how they got there. You said under suspicious circumstances. There's a lot of diplomatic and legal scrutiny over what has happened. We know that cases have been opened, charges have been preferred, but under what prism is DIRCO itself looking at what has happened? Because the question has been, what laws govern individuals who find themselves on the front lines of another country's war or as part of their army?
So that's where the Foreign Military Assistance Act comes in, and that is any individual or company is prohibited from providing any form of military assistance to a foreign government without the knowledge of government. There are instances, for example, where a state-owned entity like the NEL in the process of arms manufacturing, would be selling arms to other states. But that goes through a committee of the executive called the National Arms Convention Committee, and it is then approved by that National Arms Convention Committee, which DIRCO also forms a part of. So naturally, any form of military assistance has to be government sanctioned. It cannot be that Tshepisa wakes up on a Friday morning and decides she's going to fight for the Republic of X, for example. So that's prohibited, and that then requires our law enforcement agencies to assess exactly how these individuals found themselves on the front lines. If it was a decision of their own accord, then they would be in violation of the law. If there are other circumstances, then other laws would also kick in to assess how they ended up there and exactly what law has been violated. This is the domain of law enforcement agencies and not necessarily the domain of DIRCO. Our role in this process has been to assist with the repatriation of these individuals back to South Africa. And I do want to stress to people who may be listening who are South Africans that this was an exceptional intervention by the government. We do not ordinarily repatriate citizens from other countries at government cost. This was a completely exceptional circumstances because of the manner in which these individuals, we believe, found themselves there. And there was some very, very strong appeals from a number of families of these individuals, which highlighted that there's a much more to what meets the eye around the circumstances, around how they found themselves there. And them coming back is something that would really go a long way from a humanitarian point of view in helping to resolve this challenge.
And I understand what you're saying. There's obviously guidelines as to where DIRCO would get involved, where the Department of Defense and the laws that govern it would get involved, not to re-victimize those that have found themselves in the horrendous situation that they've found themselves in. But I do want to look at the Mercenary Clause Act, Section 2 of the regulation of the Foreign Military Assistance Act, because they are politically connected individuals, allegedly, who have been at the forefront of this. So the criminality, would that then lie with them? Or does the Department of Home Affairs also scrutinize, the recruitment if these individuals believe that they were going for bodyguard training and possibly by the military of a foreign country in a foreign country?
Well, that would be part of the investigation. One would have to establish exactly what that entails. If that's one of the allegations, that it's believed that some of these individuals thought that they were going to a foreign country to learn how to be, if you quote unquote, better bodyguards or security training of sorts. That has to be tested factually by the law enforcement agencies. It wouldn't be Home Affairs though. I had to look into that. Home Affairs' role is also limited to monitoring the entry and exit of individuals into the Republic, so managing the border posts, if you like, and also the National Population Register, amongst other things. So this would be right up there with the Hawks, which is a police entity in South Africa responsible for investigating complex crimes, and this is being treated as a very complex issue that warrants highly skilled individuals in state crimes, and we think that they will be able to really drill down to establish what the facts are. Of course, as we speak, the matter is also before court, as I understand it, and some individuals have been called to appear, and there are affidavits being filed from the state and from certain individuals. So it will be clearer in time exactly what the facts are around the situation.
And there's a lot of concentration of the middleman, but it goes back to the issue of diplomacy. We've been trying to secure the Russian ambassador to South Africa to get a sense of exactly where they stand on these practices. They said they're not involved. But there was the repatriation angle that you mentioned earlier on, that these were exigent circumstances. So President Cyril Ramaphosa thanking his counterpart for assistance in returning the detained South Africans. Was there a diplomatic trade-off? Was there a diplomatic cost in this exercise?
No, I think this is a testament of our diplomacy and a testament of our diplomatic skills. And this is where we are. I think we have always said that as a non-aligned country, we are able to engage any country without a motive or without seeking to derive, especially in the context of a conflict, derive anything in particular but promoting peace. And I think South Africa's engagement has always been understood by that. You know, to be one of the things that we often highlight to illustrate our non-alignment point is prior to President Trump ascending to the presidency of the United States of America, it was only President Cyril Ramaphosa who was able to pick up the phone and call both President Zelensky and call President Putin. So this just shows that our diplomacy is able to deliver results for citizens. It's agile, and where it matters the most, we are able to leverage our strategic partnerships for the benefit of South African citizens.
Just now, then, on the public warning angle, sometimes people don't know that they don't know, and I'm talking here about the intersection between the modern hybrid warfare, so to speak. There is private military recruitment that happens, and people believe that this is outside of state-to-state relations. Most importantly, what do we say to members of the public so that they find themselves on the right side of the law, even if there are elements of criminality, there is manipulation, exploitation, etc.?
May I also take this moment to maybe to say this is not limited to, and our public warning rather, is not limited just to this situation, but broadly around opportunities for employment abroad. We often deal with cases of human trafficking in places like Philippines, Myanmar, because people have acted on an offer that really seems too good to be true. And I think that is the important rule of thumb here. If something seems to be too good to be true, it probably is. And we really believe that citizens should really scrutinize the information around these offers. Questions should be asked around logistics. Where would we stay? Security. Who will be providing support? How often will I be able to access my family? And also engaging with the South African Department of International Relations so that we can verify some of these things with our various missions abroad. One of the privileges that South Africans have in this country is that we have quite an extensive diplomatic footwork across the world. And so we are able to engage governments across the world, but also private sector players sometimes where the need arises around certain opportunities for South Africans. And it's important that citizens do touch base with our department so that we can really, really assess some of these offerings that are offered to South Africans, but also most importantly, so that we can know where you are if anything happens. So we can then also be able to inform family and so on. So all of this is quite important, and this can be done through an app that we have on any app store that you can download from. It's called Travel Smart app, and from there you are able to link up with our department, and you'll have all of the contact details of any South African embassy in the world. We do really encourage South Africans to do take up opportunities for employment wherever they arise, but make sure that the information that you have in front of you is credible.
Chrispin, thank you so much for speaking to us. Chrispin Phiri, spokesperson for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, speaking about that case that has really been of great interest, not only in South Africa. We've seen cases in Kenya, reports from Zambia, where the various countries are taking legal action. There are investigations. So it's not just a case of legality, sovereignty, but really about the protection of vulnerable young citizens and actually citizens in general. So please do what he says. Find out if it's too good to be true. Make sure that you cross your T's, dot your I's to make sure that you are going into a safe situation. That brings the time to 22 minutes past 9.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração